What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have yet another album review for you, and one that we've been looking forward to going over because we actually got to partake in a cool, Bandcamp premiere stream, which is the first time we've ever done that. And this is a band I'm definitely familiar with in the past, and it's also attached to some other bands that I know as well. Anyway, we're going to go over the latest offering from Pneuma Hagion, From Beyond. This also comes out on the 30th of August on Everlasting Spew Records. This band formed in 2015 in Texas. Now, this was initially a one-man project. Ryan Wilson, who is also in Intestinal Disgorge, and the band that I know him from, The Howling Void, which I reviewed forever ago back when we were doing Screaming Toilet stuff, was a blackened death doom project. But it has since turned into a two-man project featuring drummer Shane Elwell of also Intestinal Disgorge, but also in Noisy Neighbors. And just because I wanted to write this down, because it's a weird band name, he's also in the band Vaginal Bear Trap. They make those. Cabela's, I'm sure.
Right. I'm gonna go ask.
Now, this is their third full-length overall, first one with Everlasting Spew, and all right, initially, because I had jammed some of their albums before a while ago, this was more along the lines of blackened death metal / dissonant death metal, and this new album is definitely a turn into a more pure, just flat-out brutal, heavy style of death metal. Even the production and vibe of this has changed, which the production here was done by Mike Garrison of Noisy Neighbors. So there's a lot of cool interlocking stuff there in terms of Texas metal.
I actually had never heard of this band until about 3 weeks ago. We did a live stream, and the people that know me knew what would be up my alley, and they said, hey, check out Pneuma Hagion, and I said, okay. And I looked them up, and I looked up who they sounded like, and I said, yeah, that's me. I'm gonna jam it. So I jammed the rest of their discography a few days ago, not knowing that this record was sitting in my email. And then Everlasting Spew reached out to us and said, hey, do you guys want to do a Bandcamp party? And we said, okay. And that's my introduction to this band.
Now, I jammed one of the singles that came out, and for the life of me, I can't remember which one, but I definitely noticed that this was a departure from what they did before. I discovered this band pretty much just kind of on YouTube, looking at stuff like Hyperdontia, Sulphurus, stuff that was more at least that time with Hyperdontia's first album, more atmospheric, kind of dingy sounding death metal, and Pneuma Hagion came up. And I really liked what I heard. I just never got around to buying any of their earlier stuff. And again, this is just very different. Right from the rip on the opening track, Harbinger of Dissolution, this is flat out brutal, bassy, just heavy chugs, blast beats, the most primal, blunt force trauma riffs you can imagine, and that pretty much continues throughout the entire album.
Everything that I love about death metal is on here. Chuggy riffs, low-end tremolos, blast beats, gnarly, bendy breakdowns, songs like Resurrected Abominations starts out with this super lurching riff and this big old meaty stomping groove. The Temple Fires actually has a really great hook in it. Probably actually one of the biggest standout hooks on the entire record. That tremolo is catchy as shit. Reminds me a lot of Fossilization. Or the big evil track, Aeon. Very sinister, just evil sounding. Again, big lurching riffs. And something that happens a lot in this record, the vocals by themselves are pretty gnarly anyway with growls, but there's a lot of gang growls and demonic whispers that are also done in a gang form, and I really like that.
The vocals on here I really like because, for the style, you expect, mostly just low gutturals, just some inhuman, John Gallagher style burp throughout. And I'd probably be fine with that because it would kind of fit. But the vocals on here, honestly, it kind of reminds me of Steve Tucker. They're kind of gravelly, they're, low, but they're well enunciated. And when they layer them, the vocal layer that goes kind of on top to complement the main vocals is kind of blackened, kind of harks back to, what they were doing earlier. But musically, there's really not any, blackened elements. So it kind of gives it, a little bit more of a sinister edge. The production on here is monstrous sounding, a lot of low end because the guitars are super down tuned and they are thicker than a snicker, and the bass sounds like it's being boiled in motor oil in the background. Like, it is just snarling and gross. The drums absolutely pound. Comparatively, I would say it's very similar to bands like Mortician, minus, the horror movie samples. Like, it actually gets the music pretty quickly. Fulci, to a degree, too. Mutilatred. Incantation, but mostly just in, like, the breakdown moments. And Brodequin, to some degree, too. Lots of, the frequent fast blasting. Even the drum sound is kind of comparable. It has, like, a very pronounced kind of snappy snare, but it's not that, pingy, brutal death snare that absolutely drives me nuts.
Right, I hate that snare, and I'm glad it's not that. Very primal, very meat and potatoes, very almost cut and dry as to what they're doing. It reminded me a lot of Flesher. Or Sanguisugabog, or, once again, Mortician, Incantation, stuff like that. It's just like all the heaviest moments of all of those bands.
Yeah, like I would say the singular purpose on this album was to be, I don't know, heavier than like a dump truck full of cinder blocks being dropped on your skull.
Yeah.
And mission accomplished. Like, this album is punishing from start to finish, which... that doesn't take very long because it is under 25 minutes and there's not a single track on here over the 3-minute mark. So a lot of these are just quick, brutal. They kind of get in there, get the job done, wreck your neck for a bit, and then it is on to the next one, which there's really no like transitional atmosphere or like huge lead-ins. Like occasionally you'll get like isolated riffs, which are really nice because it gives you time to kind of like soak in how disgusting that riff will be. Those Who Obey is a really good example of them isolating riffs and kind of just like leading you in and letting you know what the song's going to be all about, which generally it's going to be about blast beats, chugs, squealies, all the heaviest, nastiest stuff you can imagine. Occasionally it gets a little bit outside of that formula because this definitely has a formula and we'll get into that a little bit more. All the World's Enslaved has probably one of the most distinct breakdowns in the sense that it is just different than all the other breakdowns. It's more of a Death Doom breakdown. Slowest, gnarliest, most droning breakdown on the entire album. But it is kind of short-lived because it transitions into, well, things that this album does a lot. Because this album being very minimalist and very primal, it likes to repeat a lot of the same tropes from track to track. Namely, breakdowns, heavy, deep tremolos, blast beats, grooves. And while those things are all huge on death metal, like across the board, I feel like they are kind of stripped down to their bare elements here and are kind of left exposed for just sounding very similar from track to track.
And then there's another thing that caught both of our ears, and it's inescapable. Squeals. There is a squealy tag, if not on every breakdown, on most riffs as well, but in every song there's a squeal. And while that's okay, sometimes that squeal is added on a second breakdown in a song. The Temple Fires would be a good example of that. That's a song I really like, but the first breakdown that they had could have ended that song. When your songs are that short anyway, like, they could have ended on a really strong note with that first breakdown. But then the second breakdown hit with the stupid squeal, and I'm like, why? Another song that does that, The Light of Long Dead Stars. You could have ended on the first breakdown, but then the second one came with the stupid squeal.
Some of the transitions on here I feel are odd, and I don't know, like, there's a vibe on here where I feel like this album is just very stripped down. Like, it is so down to the very basic elements where, honestly, it feels like, there are sections where they are playing the same riff just differently, like, like picking it differently, whether they're doing like a tremolo or like it's a chromatic riff or something like that. It's the same melody, and then they just slow it down for the breakdown.
Or they put it in a different spot to throw you off a little bit. But like, there's a ton of places where I was like, oh, that's a pretty nasty descending riff. It appears in like 3 songs.
Or the song Archon, which has a really distinct tremolo hook that I really got into, and it goes into a really cool groove. There is a section towards the end where everything kind of drops out, and I feel like you're being prepared for like a doomy breakdown or something like that, and then it just kind of starts up with blasts again. Like, you get some isolated riffs, a long extended growl. It feels very open in that moment. Like, I don't know, anything can happen, and you're kind of hoping for something slow, but it doesn't come. It turns into a blast beat section with a tremolo, which, believe me, that's like every track.
And not only does it start again with a blast beat, but it starts with the same one that stopped, that led into this transition that you thought was going to be something different. There's that riff, and then the build, and then it dies out, and then it starts out with the same riff that was before the build.
And honestly, this was something that kind of came to us like very early on in the album. Like, you know, first 2 tracks, like, all right, this is this band's style, at least for this album, or what they're changing over to. Cool. This is brutal. This is heavy. It's very minimalist and just primal as hell. But as the album went on, the songs kind of just like lack character. Like, there's not enough to make them stand out. Like, Temple Fires was probably one of the big standouts for me, just because there was like a really solid hook in it, like a melody that stood out, and it wasn't like kind of the same tremolo patterns. Because I hate to say it, like a lot of the blast and tremolo patterns on here feel very interchangeable. As in, you can just cut and splice them in to these other songs, and I feel like it really wouldn't make a world of difference. And with elements like that, it kind of made me thankful that the songs were short, because if these songs were, you know, stretched out a bit, I feel like you would really feel like kind of the repetition start to weigh on you. Because, you know, in terms of the riffing, like, yeah, there are some harmonized riffs occasionally, but there's not a lot of, like, I don't know, like extra character to them, like a lead melody or some dissonant atmosphere or something like that. Or like, you know, a clever different syncopation. Like, you get some syncopated breakdowns, but often they kind of follow the same pattern as well.
Yeah, oftentimes they're just brutal, slammy breakdowns, and like, again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but when you put them on the end of every song, you're just like, we've already been here.
I kind of wonder a couple things about this. Like, all right, one, you could say maybe there's some growing pains. Like, this is kind of a big shift in terms of the band's sound, because again, their, you know, last 2 albums, a little bit different, a little bit more, you know, atmosphere. I would just say, like, they just felt like bigger albums overall. But there's also a part of me that feels like maybe this wasn't, like, complete, because I don't feel like a lot of the songs were hammered out. Like, these kind of feel par-baked. Like, yes, they're brutal as hell. This album is relentlessly heavy, but it feels stripped down. Like, it feels like it was left out in the street in Detroit and someone woke up and pounded on cinder blocks. Like, they took all the shiniest parts right off of there. And that just kind of gives me this, like, almost incomplete feel, along with the fact that the album is very short. Like, these songs might have been just a bit too bare bones and they still needed some work, but, you know, they wanted to get a new album out. They wanted to show that they have changed the direction of the band.
Right.
You know, I do want to hear what comes out after this, but this feels like, I don't know, kind of a rough shift overall, just because, I don't know, I just feel like there wasn't enough, like, creativity on here, like, just in terms of, like, sitting down and really kind of, like, hammering out these songs past the riffs.
Yeah. Like Resurrected Abominations, after that breakdown, it just ends. I feel like with that song in particular, there was way more there, and it just stopped before it got there. Like, if you listen to this song, there is a general progression throughout the song. And even with the breakdown even has this brief building moment to it. And you're like, all right, this is going to go into something else cool. And then it ends. And that's what makes me think that there may not have been time to smooth everything out and present it maybe the way they wanted to.
Yeah, like, while I would say that this definitely has a lot of rinse and repeat, it does rinse and repeat a lot of things that I do like. It's just, I kind of wish there was, like, a little bit more. Like, you can have too much of a good thing. Like, I love tremolos, I love blasts, I love nasty breakdowns. This album has all of them, but you can't have, like, too much of a good thing to the point where you kind of get tired of it. And if all the breakdowns are kind of similar and they all have a very similar squealy tag to them, it starts to become kind of rote. And circling back to the fact that I heard a single from this a while ago, I would figure I would be able to, like, kind of pick it out,
Yeah.
you know, after multiple listens. And for the life of me, I can't remember which one, because they all kind of share the same elements. So overall, I'm still going to give this 3 stars. It was kind of hovering at a 2.5, but honestly, I think it is well executed for what it is. It's just kind of lacking in creativity. Like, this is definitely a lot of rinse and repeat brutality, but it is done really well. Like, the tremolos are heavier than hell. The breakdowns are absolutely disgusting. The production's filthy. So, I mean, if you like your death metal / almost brutal death metal, like, kind of in the vein of, like, again, Mortician, Mutilatred, stuff like that, strongly recommend checking it out. I kind of hope that they get a little bit more, you know, in the way of creativity on the next one, but this is still pretty decent.
I agree. I'm going to give it 3 as well. First of all, I really like this band, and the records before this are incredible, and this record is good. it just like we said, it feels like it's missing something. Of course, it has all the tropes about death metal that I love. It's chuggy. It's got low-end tremolos. It's got nasty breakdowns. It's got some dissonant moments to it. It's got demonic vocals. It sounds evil as shit. Like, I like all those things. But not over and over and over and over again. It's like eating some chocolate, all right? You love chocolate. And then your buddy comes over and he's like, have some more chocolate. And you're like, okay. And then he's like, have some more and more and more and more. And you're like, dude, calm down. I can't eat all this chocolate.
Give me diabetes.
Right, I'm gonna have diabetes soon. My arm's gonna fall off. My foot's gonna go away. Like, and it just feels like I'm being fed kind of like a rinse and repeat cycle. Like, yeah, it's heavy, it's grooving, it's brutal, but there's not really anything more to it. And the fact that the songs are so short, and not only are they short, but you end up adding some of the same elements into them, like the squeals, like that just drove me nuts. It just didn't hit home in the ways that their other records did. And if you're a big fan, again, of like Mortician, Flesher, Incantation, Fossilization, all the big gnarly groovy bands, you're gonna really like this. I just felt like it was missing some things to really drive it home.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, up on our banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, album reviews, discography rankings, discussion topics, is it metal, is it not metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates, a bunch of crap we probably haven't even done yet this year, and we're running out of time on this year. But anyway, we do all this stuff because we appreciate you guys. We love the fact that you guys still, after almost 6 years now, still continue to comment and watch our videos and do all the wonderful things you do. It's awesome to run into you guys at shows. It means the world to us that you guys care about this as much as we do. We appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule. And again, tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys do rule, because I said so. And if you don't believe me, you're wrong. And we will catch you later.